What's up, everybody? You are listening to the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. This is Dr. Zach Baker, and I have with me today Dr. Corrie Jones, who is going to be a more regular guest here on the show as she has evolved into a new role here at Rehab to Perform. And Corrie's been practicing physician for about 13 years now, has been with the company now for a few years, and has really developed a niche with this phase of her career of something that she's very passionate about that we're going to talk about today, and that's the topic of mentorship. So, Corrie, appreciate you taking the time to meet today. I know you're jack of all trades, so I think I actually was able to pull you away in the middle of your day in between some patient care. But on this topic of mentorship, what does mentorship mean when you hear those words? Because I think it's kind of, I don't want to say an ambiguous term, but I think it's kind of a buzzword term now in the industry. And what does mentorship actually mean for you?
Yeah, I would say that's a good question. The biggest thing I would say is that all of us come out of school or come out of different jobs, and we have some sort of foundation for how we want to do things, right? So we have some ideas of special tests to do, a way to do an eval, a way to do a progress note, a way to treat. Everybody has that in mind when they get out of school. What I think is limited at times is our way of structuring or organizing these things so that we can make better decisions and problem solve a little bit easier, right? So I feel like mentorship to me is having somebody willing and open to structure what they already know a little bit better, but then also taking that structure and learning how to apply it, and then also learning how to grow from it. So kind of those three things. If you can find somebody that's willing to do that, restructure, really learn to apply it, and then grow a little bit, you can really find that those are the therapists that start leading the field because they're always evolving and always trying to get a better understanding of what we do.
No, I love that. And when I think of mentorship, or when I need to define mentorship, my natural inclination is just to go on Google and Google what the definition of mentorship is. So that's what I did. And what I found was it is a period of time during which a person receives guidance from another individual, or as they define, a mentor. And I heard an analogy when I got into the residency space and we were creating the sports residency at R2P. And a big question we hear there is like, why should you do a sports residency? And I believe it was Dr. DeWitt from the Ohio State University and their sports residency program. And the way that he describes it to physical therapists who are pursuing residencies is, he said, it's imagine going to a race. You're running a half marathon, you're running a marathon, you're running a trail race, whatever that is. You can show up on race day and you can make it to the finish line. There's a big crowd of people there. It's not hard to follow the flags and follow the signs and see where the crowd's going. You know the distance and you know a general layout of the course.
Right.
And you could do well. You could do very well. You could even win the race. You could also have some unforeseen things that pop up that you weren't expecting or you don't know how to triage. So I said the other option you have is when you sign up for that race, you can look at the course map. You can talk to other people who have ran that course before. You can get a training program. You can have a very kind of calculated approach to this, and you will probably do better from a time standpoint, but you'll probably also just be much more comfortable going through the experience on race day compared to somebody who just shows up and wings it. And it's kind of a similar thing within our career as well. You know, we all graduate and then we take boards and then you get your license and you start working. Eventually we'll all figure it out. You get enough reps, you get enough successes, you get enough failures. Eventually you're going to figure things out and you will get to a point that you are comfortable with as a clinician. But I do think that there are some intentional things that you can do as the employee or as the employer to help facilitate and expedite this process. And Corrie, I know you've had I'll say the luxury or the privilege or the opportunity, however you want to look at it, of working in a variety of different places. You know, we're not the only place you've ever worked at. You've done internships places, you've had full-time job places at places, you've had part-time jobs or different experiences and exposures. So I know you've seen mentorship in a variety of different ways and how it was implemented and how it was played out. But in your opinion, what needs to be in place for mentorship to work? And just for context, we'll say, in the physical therapy outpatient setting, what are some things that need to be in place for this to actually work and get the results we're looking for?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question because there's a couple different aspects to it. The biggest thing I would say is practicality. So many times we have certain like productivity, requirements at different jobs that we work at, and we have to see this number of patients and this amount, which you have to do that. Every therapy office has to have that. And yet, if you want to run a mentorship where people actually have the time to question and grow and understand new perspectives, there has to be time for that. So whether that is co-treating so that you still see some level of productivity, or if it's time set aside, that has to be something that the company really takes time to invest in because it's financially something that you have to be willing to do. So every time block that you take off the schedule, obviously that's money. So you have to be willing to put some time blocks in there if that's the case. If not that, and it's totally volunteer, then you're looking for time after work or time in a way that both parties are willing to set it aside in a non-paid position. So it can be done in different ways, and I've seen that done in different clinics that I've worked in. I would say most of the time it was that last option where it was more of a volunteer capacity where, hey, I want to keep growing. Can somebody mentor me outside of my own time? And that's something where it's cool because you're showing that you have passion. Your mentor has passion because they want you to grow regardless, and you want to grow regardless. But again, one of the cool things that we get the opportunity to at R2P is we have a company-wide mentorship where we do find that it's worth the investment. We want to grow. We want to be better at what we do every day. We want to be a standard for giving really good physical therapy. So we've made the investment and we've blocked time on people's schedules to really take that time to review different topics and see different things. So that's kind of like the practical side, but then also you have the mental side, right? I have to have someone who has humility because they have realized that they don't know everything. But then I also have to have somebody who has a growth mindset, somebody who's willing to kind of seek other ways of thinking about things. Everybody can get caught up in that siloed thinking or even patterns of thinking, right? Here's the way I've always done it and it's always worked. I'm going to keep doing it. But then there has to be an understanding that other people know things that you don't know. And they have expertise in things that they have been around a little bit longer, or they've read research that you have not read yet. And I think it's just, we know that all knowledge is shared, right? Like you don't know anything that all these other people haven't taught you. That's where all of us gain knowledge. But it's being willing to say that everyone around you has that, and choosing a mentor that really can give you different perspectives than your own, or different perspectives than the typical people that you've heard, so that you can grow and see things in a wider range of understanding, and not get into that siloed way of thinking. So practicalities, we need the time to do it. We need the mentors who are willing. We need the mentees who are willing. We need that growth mindset from both. And I would say just in general, we need a desire for that, growth, and that desire to be willing to change what we're doing and not get set in our ways.
Yeah, and I think mentorship, any decision you make as a company always comes with an opportunity cost. And I think you can make the argument of, well, if we spend too much time mentoring, we're not going to have enough time to see patients and have revenue, and we'll have a lot of good PTs that we can no longer employ because we don't have any money to pay for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you can go on the other opposite end of the spectrum and say, you know what? The way to make the most money is to see a patient every single minute of the day that we have, and that works for a short term. And then you have an issue where you can't attract employees because you don't have any mentorship in place, or you have people on staff that are craving things that you're not providing. So you have to find kind of what that happy medium is, what that balance is, and the economics of everybody's company are going to be a little bit different. If you're a staff of 2 versus 12 versus 112, you're going to have different advantages and different disadvantages when you look at smaller versus larger companies. And there's not really a one-size-fits-all or even a right or wrong answer. It just needs to be intentional. And you need to have some sort of plan in place, and you need to have a staff that also views it as something that is of value. And I think part of that comes down to the hiring process. Now, this kind of brings me into the next question of this, Corrie, is who should participate in this? And I've seen different things at different companies. I've talked and collaborated with other people in similar roles to myself, because I think we all agree that mentorship's important, but it's one thing for the company to think it's important or the employee to think it's important. It's imperative that we have a very shared vision over what we're trying to accomplish and who is playing what role in this. So in your thoughts, how do you determine who participates in this? Is it mandatory? Is it voluntary? Do we do it by seniority or how many years somebody is or isn't out of school or with the company? Admittedly, I don't know what the right answer to that is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you've seen work well or some shortcomings of other decisions.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because when you say mentorship, like one of the first things that comes to mind for me is like the whole Mr. Miyagi relationship, right? So you have somebody older teaching somebody younger. So I feel like a lot of times with mentorship, the image is that it's young, new clinicians or students or whatever. However, again, like what we just said a little bit ago, what's required for mentorship? It's a growth mindset, intentionality, resources. So can anybody do it? Well, yeah. I think some of the most successful people that I know, they never stopped being mentored. They were always seeking somebody else with more experience or seeking someone else with more knowledge to continue gaining from. So I don't think it comes down to age or seniority as much as an interest in growing. So one of the things that we do here is after 90 days of working for us, you're going to drop into the mentorship regardless of how long you've been a PT, regardless of what kind of position you've been in before, because we just want to be on the same page and we want to be, again, able to kind of improve our clinical reasoning together. And then whenever you graduate kind of that initial foundational side of things, it's really helpful because sometimes there's people that want to dive a little deeper. So what if there's a level 2 mentorship or somebody that really wants to go a little bit more one-on-one or have discussions that instead of scratching the surface, they're diving deep into a specific topic. So honestly, you get to the point where anybody can join mentorship and anybody can do it. On a company standpoint, if you want everybody on the same page for consistency, especially like for us, we have 12 offices, trying to make sure that we stay on the same page, the mandatory side of things is very helpful because we have a similar way of making decisions, a similar way of treating. Not that everybody's going to be exact, but we at least have standards we're upholding. However, when you get past that, hey, we want to be on the same page side of things, and I just want to keep growing, that's where maybe it's more voluntary. Maybe it is somebody who just wants more mentorship than what they've had or wants to pursue a little bit more than just those foundational sides of things. So I would say anybody's up for mentorship. Gosh, I myself have been, like I said, doing this for 13 years, and I would love to have mentoring. So, and I do have some mentors that I go to with questions. So really, really helpful, regardless of experience, age, anything, because all of us can still gain new perspective by talking to someone else who's been around for a little bit.
And I think mentorship can evolve and the topics can evolve as well. And you alluded to it earlier where you said there are certain things that are mandatory or non-negotiable. And I think there's certain things that are unique to a company with respect to their mission, their philosophy, how they want to conduct business or operate, that there needs to be commonality on that. And that may be some of the things that are more procedural type mentorship. Then you can get into more of the clinical X's and O's, and this is where you can talk about, everything from your basic fundamental treatment, clinical decision-making, all the way up to like your secondary, tertiary topics that are really, really niche or specific or kind of diving into the weeds too. And those may be ones that are a little bit more voluntary. But where I've kind of found my role evolve as well is I don't do much clinical mentorship anymore in regards to, teaching people how to tend to somebody with Achilles tendinopathy or dealing with a low back pain flare-up. But what I am doing a lot of now is mentoring people going into new roles. Hey, you've never taken a student before, or you're now a site director, or you're now overseeing this project. So I think mentorship, we always think of it in the sense of, how do I do my clinical care better? But in reality, it's just how do I do my job better? How do I shape and evolve my career? And I think that mentorship topics, what you talk about with somebody who's 1 or 2 years out of school, it may be different than somebody who's 7, 8, or 9 years out of school. Which kind of brings me to my last question for you, Corrie, is how would you define success with mentorship? How do we know it's accomplishing what we want it to accomplish?
Yeah, so if we kind of go back to that, hey, our goal for mentorship for this first group that's mandatory is standardization. Maybe you have a couple of KPIs that you're choosing to really say, we want to zero in on these things to be better as clinicians. So that could be less in-office incidents, or that could be a lower churn rate where people are coming for their eval and they're coming back and back and back for more visits. It could be successful discharges. So it could be, hey, our therapists are getting better and better at having somebody complete a course of care and reach all of their goals, which, to be honest, that's what we're up for everybody when it comes to PT anyway. Or like you were saying, if their goal is actually being a better leader, sometimes we can literally just send out a survey and say, hey, how's this site director doing? Are they doing a good job supporting you? Are they fulfilling their role to your standards? So there can be a lot of ways to measure it, but I would say the big thing is taking time at the beginning of the mentorship to say, these are the things that we want to get out of it. So there might be some that are more company-based, like the ones I just mentioned, but then I'm assuming that there's also going to be some personal ones. So as a clinician, I want to be better at return to sport testing. I want to be better at identifying red flags, and I want to be better at communicating with patients that have a lot of fear around their injury. That's just like 3 examples. But if you take the time in the beginning to really kind of nail some of those down and have goals, we all know that goal writing is helpful in PT, but then it can be in the mentorship too. If we bring some goals, then we can really zero in on what topics we're covering, and then we can assess at the end, did we actually reach those or did we not? So it might be worth a conversation at the beginning of any mentorship to say, we have some goals that we want to make sure that we're hitting. What are those in order to define success? And then in the end, I think it's really important to just go back and reflect. So is there a debriefing period of time? We tend to send out surveys for our mentorship. So it can be that format, or it can be one-on-one or whatever. But taking the time to debrief and say, like, do you feel better as a clinician? Do you feel better as a leader? Do you feel like this mentorship was worth it? Because number one, it helps you if you're teaching. Me in personal, if I need to understand if I'm doing well in mentoring, I need to get that feedback because I need to know if there's things that I can do better or things I can change. But then also as a mentee, am I putting effort and intentionality into asking questions that I want the answers to? Am I taking the time to review the materials that I was given so that I can grow? Or is this just kind of like another thing I'm ticking the box? Because if it's ticking the box, that's hard to define success because you're just getting through it. But if you have goals and you have things that you can actually look at the end, now we know that actually this was worth my time and it was something I was able to be very intentional about.
Perfect. Corrie, love all of that. And the big message I get listening to that is the mentorship needs to be geared around some sort of goal or intention. And if we can define that, then there's typically some sort of way that we can measure that as well. No different than when we measure things in patient care. And it's probably not going to be perfect. And you're going to have this ongoing iteration of trying something out, looking back, getting feedback, rolling out something new. Execute that, get feedback, and it evolves as you go. Corrie, appreciate the time, appreciate your thoughts. If you are listening and enjoyed this episode, please share, like, and or subscribe. You are listening to the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. This is Dr. Zach Baker and Dr. Corrie Jones.